Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, Episode 2, How is Lady Pole? Definitely love this episode. It was a great second one, and I think the best part about it is we got to see, and one of the kind of surprises is that this takes place months after the premiere, but we finally get to see Jonathan and Mr. Norrell actually come together, and I was glad it happened in the second episode. And the thing that really surprised me is that they were actually, at this point at least, they're master and apprentice. And unfortunately, Norrell's style, I guess, is kind of turning on him because we have this new magician in town where he's the one who's very outspoken. He's the one who wants to know things, and he feels that he's being taken away from a lot of the great aspects of magic that he should be learning, considering it's magic and there are only two people on Earth. He should learn everything that Mr. Norrell already knows, and he's learning that fairies are the ones that they're kind of like this big component, especially considering they're involved with the Raven King and they're the ones that took him to court basically and banished him. He feels as though he's being basically just banished from an entire section, the most important section, as he put it. It's like being, I can't remember the exact thing, but basically being an official for a church and, not being able to learn anything about God. So he's, already experiencing Norell's sort of bad side of things, and I love the way that they played that. Like, even the people that were kind of working with Norrell, like the two guys, even they are kind of manipulating him just to kind of make a show out of things and see exactly what's going to happen with these two characters, because they're obviously incredibly different. One is master, one is apprentice. But at the same time, Norrell is the one who, despite knowing all this magic and learning after years, it's really, really obvious, especially in this episode, that Jonathan is the one who's basically born with the talent. It's almost as if he's actually born of magicians, and Norrell was the one who just learned magic because he's like a human who was just able to figure it out. It kind of seems like that's how it is. Like, Norrell figured it out, but Jonathan was actually born of, a mage and a witch or something. That's how it seems, because he knows spells that he doesn't know. Like, he mentions the music where, and I love the analogy of that. I thought that was a perfect analogy where, if you listen to music, you can guess what the next note's going to be because you know music. Like, music does follow some of the same patterns over and over again over time, and sometimes, even if it doesn't, you can kind of guess, you can kind of think what's going to come next, or if someone's speaking to you, you can figure out what the next word's going to be if you're focusing on it enough. And I love that concept where he's doing something and it's just, it clicks for him and he can't even reverse it because it's just an automatic thing for him. So he has these spells. He, has an excessively amazing show of force towards the end of the episode with the horses, which was like the really big thing, I think, from the trailer. And it was even cooler than I thought it was going to be. I thought initially, because it was like, oh, the defenses are up, and I figured, okay, that's why he does that. I thought he was going to do it the same day where he was going to test the defenses because he wasn't exactly sure if Norrell did it right. But then it's like, no, he does this to save the boat and kind of send it back on its way. And he, digs his hands in and it sends like these shock waves and these giant horses come out and they, hit the boat and send it the right way. And it just looked really cool. And he stands up, everyone's clapping and cheering. He's just like, sweet, like, I did it. And it's far beyond anything Norrell ever did. Like, it's, a huge show of force. Like, even the day before, of course, when Norrell put up the defenses, it was like, like, I don't see anything. It's like, no, they're there. Like, I did it. It's done. And then he takes off. He's like, no, it's right. I did it. They're invisible. That's the point. And then he just takes off. But then you have Jonathan come in and correct, a bit of a mistake. Like, it wasn't exactly meant to do that, of course. It was meant to stop people coming in. So he corrects this mistake with an epic show of force, and everyone's in, like, it's like shock and awe for everybody. So it really changes the game between the two of them just in this one episode alone. And it's like, now they want to take him to the defenses because he made this great show of force. And of course, personally speaking, I think he's the better choice to go to war than Norrell anyway, because he has, for whatever reason, this innate ability to do magic, even though he has no practice of it. Like in the very beginning, when the two guys from the last episode find him, which I thought was cool. I thought that they were kind of just there to introduce Norrell, and then they would not be in the show anymore. And technically, they still could be, and maybe they'll just be in the beginning of each episode for whatever reason. But when they come in and find him, it's like all he had was this kid's book on the Raven King, and he has all these spells that he's done. He summoned a woman that he learned this spell from someone, and the spell didn't even work for the actual person, but he was able to do it right. So they're taking him away to fight for the war, and of course the two guys come in and manipulate Norrell like, well, if it's for auction, this king has died. If his books go up for sale for auction, then of course, Mr. Strange would feel that he's entitled to the same chance of auctioning and trying to purchase these books as you would be. And of course, they kind of manipulate him into saying like, oh, send Jonathan away so that he can be sent off to fight the war, and he can get his books, but they'll also get what they want, being able to send Jonathan off to fight the war, because that's who they really want help from. And then we get the ending sort of auction with Jonathan's wife and Mr. Norrell, and they're going through, and it's fairly normal. It's like, okay, well, he was gonna lose the books when it got to like, I think only like 300 or 400, and then his wife decides, I'm gonna bid for these books for my husband so that he can learn magic, because he's obviously not gonna learn what he needs to from Mr. Norrell, and she got a nice display of that as well, because she lost when he was going to get when she was going to win for, I believe, 800, and he just shot out 2,000. So it kind of messed with her. Like, she really saw full on how he feels, and he's being manipulated too, of course. But even if he wasn't, I think it would kind of end up the same way if he knew what Jonathan was trying to do, where it's like, I want to know about fairies and exactly what they do. And Norrell, even before he summoned the one guy, which we kind of find out that he's actually a fairy in this episode officially, that's what happened. He's a fairy who's very powerful. Even without all that stuff, Norrell was kind of like, fairies are bad, and it's always bad, and this and that. And it seemed like it would have gone the same way whether he was manipulated or not. Like, you can't know about fairies, that's all bad stuff, and he would have tried to hide it from him. So I like the way that they played things. I thought it was really well done. And the guy being there at the end, the fairy who can resurrect people, him being there at the end, I thought was just really cool. It was a nice interesting way to show how he's going to be connected between these two. And what I really thought was going to happen, and it still could, I think he might allow himself to be summoned by Jonathan in the next episode, or the next time Jonathan tries. But when Jonathan was summoning him, I thought, okay, this is how he's going to really learn magic, is because this fairy is going to team up with him rather than Norrell, because Norrell, he accepted the deal technically, but of course he wants to kind of change things back because they kind of suck right now. But I thought he'd accept his offer, or he'd make a deal with him somehow, and he would teach him this magic, and that's how they would really become rivals. And he mentions that he's just as dumb, that Jonathan is just as dumb as Norrell. He's like, he's ugly and stupid, and Jonathan can hear what he's saying. Like, he basically heard it as a whisper, but he could hear it. So I find that very interesting, and that was just another nice little display that he has this oddly innate ability to do magic, and he can, even when he's not supposed to, he can pick things up. He can hear what's being said. And of course that led into, when his wife comes in, it leads to the fairy basically just being, love struck by how beautiful his wife is. And that's why he was there at the end of the episode. And I think it's going to push him, because he saw Norrell kind of hurt her, and he has this, odd attachment to her based off of how beautiful he believes she is. And so I think that's what's going to push him to help Jonathan, basically go against Norrell, so that he can just see Jonathan's wife smiling because he finds her so beautiful. So I love the way they played things out. I think it was incredibly fast. I did a little bit of research. It is a mini series for the show, which is Apparently, it's fairly old. It came out a while ago, or they planned on doing this like years ago, and so maybe it just came out. I don't know, but like the series is already out. It's just on BBC America new for whatever reason. I don't know why it took so long, but either way, I'm enjoying it. This is a great second episode. I think it nicely went through things really fast. We got to see the characters come together. Jonathan is now going off to war by the end of this episode. Norrell is showing a full display that he wants to keep everything magical to himself, and he's kind of made even more of an enemy out of Jonathan's wife. Or I think he's officially made an enemy out of Jonathan's wife, having shown what he did, during that auction. So I think it's going to be great to see how these characters break apart. And with Jonathan being off away, it's going to be his wife versus Norrell for the next episode at least, if not the next two. So I can't wait to see how they do things and how Norrell kind of has to deal with kind of being left behind, but also realizing that he's not as powerful as Jonathan is. He's the one who did learn for decades, and he spent all this time and money trying to get all these books and studying and things like that. But he's still not as good as Jonathan is currently, with basically no skills, no training whatsoever. So I'm excited to see how this plays out. We got a little bit of show from his servant towards the end of the episode when the two guys were trying to manipulate him. And his servant's there. He doesn't actually say anything to him until like the very end, but he's just like rolling his eyes like, oh, they didn't know this or didn't know that. They're just saying this or saying that. So he knows what's going on, but he lets it happen. So maybe he has a plan. I don't really know, but it's like maybe he just realizes it's not that big of a deal, or he thinks that it's not that big of a deal at this moment. But like, who knows how things are gonna play out in these next couple episodes? But I definitely love this one. It was a great second episode. It seems like they're gonna be enemies really fast, and I think it's done well, so it doesn't seem really forced or rushed. So I like the way that it played out, even though everything kind of happened very rapidly. Of course, Lady Pole descending into madness, which was something I wondered, like her getting up and being all giddy and the dancing and stuff. That did start off, like, they only did it one time, and then right after that, she was like, I don't like dancing, I don't care about dancing anymore. And then the servant, he gets wrapped up in things, and he, unfortunately, kind of gets caught up in this deal as well. I thought he was going to be killed when he was in the dancing scene, and it seemed like the women were, like, surrounding him, and they were about to eat him, but fortunately, he did survive that. And we still don't really know what happened in that last portion when he heard the bell. But he had the keys, and my thought was he could just open the door, and they would both go to the room together, and then maybe that would change things around a little. I think he's still kind of in this weird state of mind where he sees what's happening, but at the same time he kind of forgets it, or he ignores it. And I was still trying to figure that out throughout the episode. Like, I don't know if he's really ignoring it or if he's forgetting it, because it seemed like he didn't really get distracted like anyone else did at all throughout this episode. He simply would just go about his day, and we really only got to see his interactions with everything when he was being affected. So it's a little hard to tell, aside from the one scene where he was talking to Mrs. Strange, and he was saying like, oh, please ignore anything she says because of this and because of that. Also, Lady Pole's story, her story about someone falling asleep and waking up to tons of tiny men on their rug, basically fighting a war. I don't know if that has something to do with Jonathan's future, considering he's going to war, and maybe it'll be just the costumes and it's the overall aspect of war compared to like the minute and really weird details, of course, of a random person buying a rug and then all the people fighting are, tiny little creatures. Maybe it's sort of a prophecy that she doesn't understand is a prophecy, and that's why she keeps spouting that out, although that's never what she's trying to say. It's just happening. It's something either from the fairy or beyond, and it is, the Raven King kind of passing down this next portion of the prophecy the only way that he can, because something's happened from Norrell's side of things, and so now that's kind of got the next set of, the next level of the prophecy going, and that's the only way that it can be told is by Lady Pole, even though it sounds just really crazy and weird and random. maybe that's what it is. So maybe it actually has some importance. Maybe it's not exactly the war aspect with Jonathan, but maybe it's something important. I mean, they focus on it a couple different times, and it doesn't result in her being helped by anyone. So I think it's her kind of saying that to whoever she can, so that we can hear it enough and realize maybe it is actually something fairly important. But either way, I'm really excited for it. The preview seemed interesting. Jonathan's in war. Norrell is possibly going to get shot, or someone near him is going to get shot at least. So I'm incredibly excited for it. I'm loving this show so far. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I think the big question for this episode is between Jonathan and Norrell, there's an excessively obvious contrast between not only how they perceive magic, but how they perform magic and what they can do with and without training. So I want to know, what do you guys think as far as their different personalities? Who would you say is right? Because of course Norrell is the one with all of the knowledge and really the history of everything that's gone down in this hatred, um, this pure hatred really that he has for the Raven King and what the Raven King did in the past, versus Jonathan, who really just wants to learn. He knows that the Raven King did bad things, but ultimately he's in this state of almost magical innocence where it's like, I just want to know what's going on. I may be able to do these things, and I know a little bit here and there from basically a children's book, but he has this sort of innocent wonder about magic and stuff. So I want to know what you guys think as far as their personalities. Who's right and who's wrong as far as, one wanting to know more and even going behind his master's back to do these extra spells, versus the other who is the master, who feels as though this is what you need to know and I'm basically cutting you off from anything that I feel you don't need to know. Because there's obviously good and bad for both sides of the fence. With Norrell, it's like the good thing is that he can seemingly, at least try to keep Jonathan away from certain bad magic. But at the same time, he's cutting someone off from, the only other person on the planet, seemingly, from, magic, from everything that is magic. And then, of course, the other side of the fence is Jonathan wanting to learn. He'd become more powerful, but he could get into some dark magic and hurt himself, maybe others. So I want to know what you guys think about it. So like I said, please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.